Hello and welcome to our podcast, which is brought to you by Sandwell Safeguarding Adults Board. My name is Lee Civita and I'm the Learning and Development Partner for Sandwell Council and also part of the board's Learning and Development subgroup. I'm really pleased to be joined by Deb Ward, who is the Operations Manager for the Sandwell Safeguarding Adults Board. So a very warm welcome to you, Deb. And Deb is going to be giving us some insights into what a VARM is. But before we do that, Deb, if you could introduce yourself and just explain your role within the SSAB.
Hello, good morning, Lee, and thanks for the opportunity for us to have this conversation. My name, as you said, is Deb Ward, and I'm the Operations Manager for Sandwell Safeguarding Adults Board, which briefly means that I help facilitate the activity of the board, look at key themes, and explore and support a business team in relation to that board activity.
Thanks for that introduction, Deb. So could I start by asking a question? Basically, what is a VARM?
Yes, Lee, very helpful question. So, a VARM, in terms of the activity, is Vulnerable Adults at Risk Meeting, but in terms of a process, it's Vulnerable Adults at Risk Management. So it's a multi-agency meeting supporting the identification of risks as perceived by professionals working with or endeavouring to work with individuals where they may have concerns that those individuals are at risk in relation to some of the choices they may be making. And part of the process of the activity is supporting effective risk planning and information sharing. So giving people, really, including the individual that professionals may have concerns about, the opportunity to meet together, to talk through the risk, to identify risks if there are additional risks, to be clear about perception and what actions need to be taken to enable people to manage the risks and maybe make changes to some of the choices they are making. So we've arrived at this point, if you like, because the SSAB, or Safeguarding Adults Board, has a statutory duty undertake what are known as Safeguarding Adult Reviews, or you may sometimes see that written as SARS. And within some of our more recent SARS, we've identified that there was often a gap, for want of a better word, where individuals that were endeavouring to work with people with a range of needs had some concerns or significant concerns about the person they were trying to work with, but either didn't know who to talk to about that, didn't have the space to share that with others, and were left feeling that they were holding the risk and also not being supported to actually talk, or not feeling confident really to talk to the individual directly about the risk, because either there were challenges about working together or engaging with one another, or really knowing how to have that conversation. In terms of the sorts of people who may be trying to be worked with or work with others, what we're talking about is individuals who have capacity and or who are making possible choices and decisions that may mean that they are at risk of serious harm or death. So there are risk taking behaviours that are presenting challenges, sometimes to the individual themselves, but often to others in terms of how they may engage with people to help those to help the identification and management of those risks and potential changes that individuals may want to make.
Thank you, Deb, for explaining so clearly what a VARM is for us. Um, my next question is who can actually arrange a VARM?
So I think that's a really key question, Lee. So a VARM meeting can be arranged or initiated by any agency, including people from within the council in its broadest sense. So as an example, that could be police, colleagues, fire and rescue, housing, the NHS, anybody really who has concerns about an individual. Providing, as I've said, they are capacited individuals and they don't meet any other process. I think we're going to go on to that a bit more in a minute.
Thanks, Deb. And when should I call a VARM or when should we call a VARM?
Thanks, Lee. So anyone should call a VARM meeting if they are worried about a person's safety and or want to explore risks and support available. For example, they may be worried about a person's home circumstances or choices they may be making. Remember though, before calling a VARM meeting, the 4 criteria must be considered. So those are: the person has capacity to make choices and decisions they are making regarding their life. Second, you believe there is a risk of serious harm or death, and this could be due to self-neglect, the risk of fire, deteriorating health, a lack of what we might describe as engagement or services difficulty in engaging with individuals, potentially individuals being targeted by the local community, being a victim of hate crime, antisocial behaviour or sexual violence. And they do not, I think I said this earlier, they do not meet the criteria for a safeguarding referral. Thirdly, there is public safety interest. And finally, there's a high level of concerns from partner agencies. So if a number of people have concerns about an individual in the way that I've described, that's another contributing factor. So all of those 4 criteria would need to be met before a VAR meeting could be called.
Thank you, Deb. And if I think that all 4 criteria does apply, what should I do next?
Thank you, Lee. So first, speak to the safeguarding lead in your organisation to discuss and agree that the criteria are met. You can then start the VAR process.
How do I get started on the process, Deb? So all 4 criteria apply, and then how do I commence the process?
So the very first thing to do is to contact the SSAB business team via the email, which is safeguardingssab@samwell.gov.uk, and complete the meeting referral form. A member of the SSA business team will send you a link to the VARM toolkit, which will have all the relevant documents and supporting information, and will issue you with what we're describing as a case reference number. The reason we're doing that is so that we can, as a business team and then as a board, have an understanding of who's calling VAR meetings, where they're happening, and the sorts of themes that may come out of those meetings. And that information then will be used to form assurance information that will then be reported back to the board. We'll advise all professionals to read the VAR procedure and framework and VAR practice guidance, which you'll be able to find on the SSAB website, and they'll also be in the toolkit that I said earlier people would get. So within that, you'll find detailed information about the process, and there's also a flowchart that you may find useful. Remember, any agency can call a VARM, but whichever agency raises the concern, they'll be expected to chair the VARM meeting. There's also guidance on how to do that available in the toolkit. There's also a VARM champion scheme, and champions are listed in the toolkit. And if you are thinking about calling a VARM, talk to the champion in your organisation. They will also be able to offer you additional support and guidance. That guidance will also be available through myself and members of the SAB business team, not least because this is a new process to Sandwell, and we are keen to ensure people feel confident about using the information and supporting the process.
Thank you, Deb. That's really useful. And could I just ask, how do we involve the person in this process, in the VARM process?
Thank you, Lee. Again, I think that's a really critical question. It's really important to involve the person in the process wherever possible. And I think given the times we're working in, where we're not always able to do things face to face, I think it's important to be creative about that and think about whether we can use mobile phones, or whether there are people that may have something of a relationship with the individual that may be able to share a laptop with them, for example, if they don't have their own. If the person doesn't want to be involved in their VARM meeting, and we've got clear information that supports that, the VARM meeting can still go ahead. There is a booklet called What to Expect, which explains the VARM process, and that could be something that, or will be something, I should say, that should be shared with the individual prior to the meeting. We're also suggesting that chairs of VARM meetings have a conversation with the individual just prior to the meeting, so they're able to get a sense from that person of what's important to them, what they think is working, what they think isn't working, and whether they have a perception and understanding of risk, and also what they think they want to do about it. What changes do they think are important? Because what professionals may be concerned about, the individual may not be concerned about, and I think it's important that helps and supports open and honest conversations within the actual meeting process. Individuals can make, sorry Lee, but individuals can make contributions in a range of ways. They can send in written responses if that's what they're able to do, or they can record something themselves. As I said, I think we do need to try and be creative about how we engage people in the meeting process, and or they could identify someone that they may want to attend on their behalf, or they may have an advocate already who's acting on their behalf.
Thank you, Deb, for explaining that so clearly. You talked about this is a multi-agency approach. So I'm just thinking about the other agencies and who we should be inviting to the meeting.
I think to a degree that depends on what people consider the risks are, but earlier on I gave some examples of the sorts of partners who have been involved in VARM meetings in other areas, and partners who would be working potentially with individuals. I think it's also important to get a sense from the person about who's important to them. Is there anyone that they have a relationship with already that they would want to be involved in the meeting, either with them or, as I've said earlier, representing them? So representatives of organisations, though, need to be in a position to make decisions on behalf of those organisations that then informs the risk planning and the plans and activity agreed subsequently. As I've said, the SSAB Business Support Team can advise and guide you, and we may do that in terms of information, but it is the lead agency's responsibility to send out the invitations and agree the methodology in terms of how the meeting's going to happen and where it's going to happen.
Thank you, Deb. And what happens during the VARM meeting?
So the meeting really is an opportunity for all agencies to share information that they know, what we might call intelligence, about the individual, about the person that they may have concerns about, and as I said, get the view from the person about their take really on what those concerns are, and agree the agency responsibilities and the responsibilities of the individual and actions that may need to be taken to help manage the risk. So effectively thinking through risk planning. It's important to remember that managing risk is a shared responsibility. Whether the person is present or not, their views must be sought and considered. So when I say shared responsibility, I mean shared between agencies, but I also mean the responsibility of the adult that individuals are concerned about. Remember, we're talking about capacitant adults here, so it's actually, as I said, an opportunity to have really open and honest conversations about concerns that individuals may have. And it's worth people thinking about what they do if there's a difference, because there may well be a difference. There may well be a difference between professionals in terms of perception, and there may well be a difference of perception between all professionals and the person that they've got concerns about. So part of the purpose of the meeting really, I think, is to bring together those views and get a point of agreement in terms of actions and ways forward. There is a meeting template to record the discussion and actions agreed, and the discussion, as I said, may identify the need to make other referrals about the person to other agencies, including children. Within the process, it's identified that there are potential children at risk too.
Thank you, Deb, for explaining what happens during the VARM meeting. Have you got any examples of what might be discussed at VARM meetings?
So I should say already that this is a new process to Stanwell, but other areas where this is embedded in their practice have reported examples such as fire risk at home, or risk of self-harm, self-neglect, and I think you said earlier about the evidence base for SARS, and self-neglect was a key, or rather I should say is a key theme in our safeguarding adult reviews. Potential hoarding, not taking medication or not accessing appointments or medical attention. Any sort of risk to animals could be an indication that something isn't working quite right for an individual, or the potential risk of exploitation or antisocial behaviour. Those are examples from other areas, and I think they're good indicators of the sorts of things we may see here in Stanwell. But as I said, it's a new process. So, and what I'm keen to understand is what themes do come up as we better embed this process.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks for sharing some of those themes and examples. That's really useful. So once we've had our VARM meeting, how do we know what's been agreed at the meeting?
So I we'll be asking that the chairs of the VARM meeting take very clear minutes, and that they then come back to the SSAB business team and on their meeting record report the key themes that have been identified and whether an action plan has been drawn up.
Thanks, Deb. And what happens after the meeting?
The actions agreed at the meeting should then be completed within the agreed timescale. So as part of the chairing role, timescales could be set against any actions. And there may be the potential for review meetings to happen. So there may be more than one VARM meeting, there may be a series of VARM meetings, depending on what people identify within their first initial meeting.
Thank you, Deb, and thanks for explaining that the process of the meeting, what we could expect to find during the meeting, and what we should be doing after the meeting. That's really useful, and that's going to be really useful for everyone. Another question I've got is when can we close the VARM?
All right, so the VARM meeting should be closed when all actions have been completed. Remember, people choose to remain living in high-risk situations, and concerns often still exist at the point of VARM closure. But the purpose of the VARM process is to minimise the likelihood of death or serious harm. The VARM minutes should identify the process and action taken to manage the risks within the evaluation and with an evaluation of the outcome.
Thank you, Deb. And where can I find more information about VARM?
So the SSAB has its own dedicated website. I believe I've given those details earlier in this conversation. So all the information will be on there.
That's great. Thanks, Deb. I think those are all my questions, Deb. I'd like to finally say a massive thank you to you for explaining so clearly what a VARM is and providing some valuable insights into how this works in practice and the process that surrounds this. And as you've clearly said throughout our discussion, this is a new process to Samwell, and the plan. I think your plan is to launch the procedure and all the supporting documentation during Adult Safeguarding Week.
That's
Which
absolutely right.
could you just remind me when that is, Deb,
So it's
please?
the 15th to the 21st of November,
Okay.
and we're going to look at the themes for Safeguarding Week and pick one that we think best fits with this process. There is actually a theme called creating safer cultures. So it may be that we do launch on the Friday of that theme day, but I think it's really positive that we can link this activity to National Adult Safeguarding Week.
That's great. Thank you, Deb. So as Deb's just said, the process and the procedure will be launched during the Adult Safeguarding Week, and your feedback on how you found this process is really welcomed and will help us identify any improvements that are required as part of the review. There is a feedback in a feedback form within the toolkit, which you will all be sent. So finally, I'd just like to say again a massive thank you to you, Deb, for taking the time and explaining so clearly what a VARM is. And thank you to everyone for taking the time to listen to us.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thanks for supporting this conversation, and I really hope that people find it helpful.
Thank you.